Every so often, an extraordinary artifact emerges that refuses to conform to conventional expectations. Impeccable craftsmanship, remarkable engineering, and enduring materials preserve echoes of human achievement that remain difficult to explain through familiar narratives alone. These remarkable discoveries continue to inspire rigorous debate and careful investigation. So get comfortable, keep your curiosity alive, and let's explore the top 10 artifacts that could reshape our understanding of humanity's earliest achievements. High in the rugged Baian-Kara Mountains, where steep ridges stretch toward the sky and thin air blankets the landscape in silence, one of archaeology's most debated stories is said to have begun. This isolated region, situated between the Tibetan Plateau and Qinghai, has long been associated with ancient cultures, remote caves, and traditions passed from one generation to the next. The harsh environment has preserved countless traces of the past, making it a place where history and legend often seem to stand side by side. According to a story that first gained wider attention decades after the alleged events, an archaeological expedition entered a series of caves in the late 1930s. Inside, the team reportedly discovered numerous small skeletons buried in carefully arranged graves. The skeletons were described as unusually short, with relatively large skulls that appeared different from those typically found in the region. Even more intriguing were hundreds of thin stone discs scattered throughout the site. These objects would later become known as the Baian-Kara-Ula, or Dropa, discs. Each disc was said to measure roughly a foot in diameter, with a small hole carved through its center. More unusual still was the claim that fine spiral grooves extended from the middle toward the outer edge, resembling the grooves of an old phonograph record. At first glance, they appeared to be carefully crafted stone artifacts. Closer examination, however, allegedly revealed something even more remarkable. Researchers who later studied the discs claimed the spiral grooves were not decorative at all. Instead, they were said to contain microscopic markings that resembled an ancient form of writing. If true, the discs would represent an extraordinary method of preserving information, one unlike anything commonly associated with known cultures from the region. The story grew even more intriguing when reports surfaced of a scholar named Tsum Nui. According to later accounts, he spent years attempting to decipher the tiny inscriptions. His translations allegedly described the experiences of a group called the Dropa, travelers whose craft had crashed in the mountains thousands of years earlier. Unable to repair their vehicle or leave the area, they were said to have remained among local inhabitants, gradually becoming part of the surrounding population. It is a remarkable narrative, one that has inspired countless books, television programs, and debates. Yet almost every element of the account becomes increasingly difficult to verify under close examination. Mainstream archaeologists point out that there is no reliable excavation report documenting the discovery of the discs. No contemporary scientific publication from the late 1930s confirms that such an expedition uncovered the described artifacts. Likewise, no recognized academic records establish the existence of Tsum Nui as a historian or linguist working within the institutions often associated with the story. The caves themselves are real. The Baian-Kara region contains numerous archaeological sites, and ancient communities certainly occupied parts of the Tibetan Plateau for thousands of years. Stone discs have also been found in various parts of Asia, although they generally served ceremonial, decorative, or practical purposes rather than functioning as mysterious records of unknown visitors. Even the unusual skeletons remain uncertain. Human remains displaying physical variation are not uncommon in archaeology. Nutritional factors, inherited traits, disease, and environmental adaptation can all produce skeletal features that differ from average populations. Without documented excavations or preserved specimens available for independent analysis, however, the reported skeletons cannot be examined using modern scientific methods. Another fascinating aspect of the legend involves the materials supposedly used to create the discs. Some versions claim laboratory tests detected unusually high levels of cobalt or other metallic elements embedded within the stone. Others suggest the discs displayed unexpected electrical properties when connected to specialized instruments, leading to speculation that they may have served purposes beyond simple inscriptions. Once again, these claims remain difficult to confirm. No verified laboratory reports supporting such extraordinary findings have been produced for independent review. Modern geologists note that natural stone can contain a variety of mineral inclusions depending on local geological conditions. Certain minerals may also produce electrical responses under specific circumstances, particularly when pressure or heat is involved. Such characteristics, while scientifically interesting, do not necessarily point toward advanced technology. The absence of physical evidence has only fueled further speculation. Some researchers interested in ancient mysteries argue that the disappearance of the discs is itself suspicious. Accounts differ dramatically regarding their fate. Some suggest they were transferred to museums before quietly disappearing into storage. Others claim they were misplaced during political upheavals. A few even suggest they were intentionally removed from public view because their true significance challenged accepted interpretations of the human past. Documented museum collections, however, offer little support for these claims. Despite decades of investigation by journalists, historians, and independent researchers, no authenticated collection matching the legendary description has been conclusively identified. Photographs frequently presented as evidence introduce another layer of uncertainty. Several images circulating in books and online appear to show circular stone objects with central holes. Yet experts have noted that many photographs depict unrelated artifacts collected from different regions and historical periods. Without reliable provenance linking these objects to the original story, their connection remains uncertain. The legend, nevertheless, continues to attract attention because it touches on enduring questions about humanity's past. Could important discoveries sometimes be misunderstood when first uncovered? Might valuable artifacts remain hidden inside museum archives, awaiting technologies capable of revealing new information? Or does the enduring popularity of the Dropa discs illustrate something equally fascinating about human curiosity? The desire to search for overlooked chapters that might expand our understanding of ancient societies? There are also cultural dimensions worth considering. Remote mountain communities often preserve oral traditions stretching back centuries. Stories evolve over time, blending genuine historical memories with symbolic narratives that reflect the beliefs of those who pass them along. Separating historical events from folklore can be remarkably challenging, particularly when written documentation is limited or absent. The Baian-Kara-Ula story may represent exactly such an intersection. It combines recognizable archaeological settings, plausible descriptions of ancient artifacts, disputed academic claims, and imaginative interpretations into a narrative that feels simultaneously grounded and elusive. Even today, historians continue examining overlooked discoveries from remote regions using improved dating techniques, satellite imaging, microscopic analysis, and genetic research. New evidence regularly reshapes established timelines, reminding us that the archaeological record remains incomplete. Every excavation adds another piece to an enormous puzzle whose full picture has yet to emerge. Whether the Dropa discs were extraordinary artifacts, misunderstood objects transformed by decades of retelling, or an elaborate modern legend inspired by genuine archaeological themes, remains unresolved. The mountains where the story is set continue to stand in quiet isolation, their valleys guarding countless traces of earlier generations. Somewhere among those windswept landscapes, the boundary between documented evidence and enduring mystery remains as difficult to define as ever, and perhaps that uncertainty is precisely what has kept the Baian-Kara-Ula discs alive in the imagination for so many years. If stories like the Baian-Kara-Ula discs remind us how easily the boundary between evidence and legend can blur, the next mystery follows a remarkably similar path. It begins not inside a hidden cave or an isolated mountain sanctuary, but with an enormous slab of stone whose intricate surface has inspired decades of debate. Unlike many ancient objects, its greatest mystery is not what it depicts, but whether it depicts something humanity should have been capable of creating at all. Resting beneath bright museum lights today is a massive stone unlike almost any other. Measuring roughly 5 feet tall, weighing close to a ton, and covered with an astonishing network of carved lines, channels, and raised contours, the object immediately captures attention. From a distance, it resembles an abstract relief sculpture. Viewed more closely, however, the patterns begin to resemble something unexpectedly familiar. Some believe they look remarkably similar to a topographical map. Known as the Dashka stone, and often referred to as the Creator Map, the artifact is associated with the Bashkortostan region of western Russia, an area shaped by rivers, limestone formations, and the southern reaches of the Ural Mountains. This landscape has witnessed countless generations of human settlement, from prehistoric communities to medieval cultures, leaving behind a rich archaeological record that continues to be explored today. The story of the Dashka stone entered public attention in the late 20th century. According to published accounts, researchers investigating ancient inscriptions and historical settlements came across the unusual slab after following local reports of mysterious stones embedded in the ground. Once uncovered, its surface revealed an intricate arrangement of grooves and raised formations unlike ordinary decorative carvings. At first glance, the markings appear almost organic, flowing naturally across the stone's surface. Yet many observers quickly noticed apparent order within the complexity. Broad channels intersect smaller ones. Elevated ridges divide smooth plains. Certain formations resemble valleys, while others suggest rivers cutting through rugged terrain. Could these patterns represent an intentionally carved landscape? Supporters of the Creator Map theory believe exactly that. According to this interpretation, the stone portrays a detailed relief map of a portion of the southern Ural region. Some enthusiasts have argued that the carvings correspond to river systems, mountain ranges, and geological features with surprising accuracy. A few even suggest the map includes engineered canals or water management systems extending across the terrain, implying knowledge of large-scale civil engineering far beyond what conventional archaeology attributes to ancient societies in the area. If such claims proved accurate, they would raise remarkable questions. How could ancient craftsmen create a three-dimensional geographic model with such precision? What methods would have allowed surveyors to record elevations over vast distances without modern instruments? And perhaps most intriguingly, who would have needed such a sophisticated representation of the landscape? Mainstream researchers approach these claims much more cautiously. Although the stone is genuine, its interpretation remains highly disputed. Specialists note that human perception naturally searches for recognizable patterns, especially when examining irregular surfaces. Geological formations, weathering, and erosion can produce shapes that resemble rivers, coastlines, or mountain ranges without having been intentionally designed to represent them. Even when carvings are unquestionably artificial, determining their original purpose is often extremely difficult. Ancient peoples created relief carvings for ceremonial, artistic, religious, and practical reasons. Without accompanying inscriptions explaining their meaning, assigning a specific interpretation becomes largely speculative. The Dashka stone presents another challenge. Its exact age has never been established with complete certainty. Estimates vary dramatically depending on which claims are examined. Some reports suggest the stone may date back only thousands of years, while more speculative interpretations place its creation millions of years in the past, long before humans are understood to have existed in any recognizable form. Those extraordinary age estimates receive little support within mainstream geology or archaeology. Scientists point out that dating carved stone directly is exceptionally difficult. Unlike wood or bone, stone itself cannot easily be assigned an age corresponding to when it was shaped. Instead, researchers must study surrounding sediments, weathering patterns, mineral deposits, and archaeological context. Without clear excavation records documenting precisely where and how the Dashka stone was found, determining its chronology becomes significantly more complicated. Another frequently discussed aspect of the artifact involves its composition. Some analyses suggest the slab consists of multiple layers of different materials rather than a single uniform block. Reports have described a dense stone foundation covered by a refined surface layer capable of holding extremely detailed carvings. Certain publications even compare this outer layer to a manufactured ceramic material, leading to speculation that its creators possessed advanced knowledge of stone processing. Geologists, however, note that complex layered rock formations occur naturally through long geological processes involving sedimentation, pressure, and mineral transformation. While unusual, layered composition alone does not necessarily indicate artificial manufacturing. Still, questions remain. The apparent precision of some carved channels continues attracting attention from independent researchers and enthusiasts. Satellite imagery and digital terrain models have encouraged renewed comparisons between the stone and the surrounding geography. Some observers claim remarkable similarities. Others see only vague resemblances shaped by selective interpretation. This disagreement highlights one of archaeology's greatest challenges. The more intricate an artifact appears, the greater the temptation to assign extraordinary meaning before sufficient evidence exists. Yet history also demonstrates that discoveries once dismissed as impossible have occasionally transformed accepted knowledge after decades of careful study. The Dashka stone occupies that uncertain middle ground. No widely accepted consensus identifies it as an advanced prehistoric map. At the same time, no universally accepted explanation has completely accounted for every claim surrounding the object or settled every debate concerning its origin. Its popular nickname, the Creator Map, adds another layer to the mystery. The title itself does not arise from established archaeological terminology, but from interpretations suggesting the artifact depicts the world from an elevated perspective, almost as though viewed from high above the landscape. Such descriptions naturally inspire imaginative theories involving forgotten engineering traditions, highly sophisticated surveying techniques, or civilizations whose accomplishments have largely disappeared from the historical record. Those possibilities remain speculative, yet they continue to fascinate because they invite reflection on how knowledge develops and how easily fragments of the past can become disconnected from the people who created them. Countless archaeological discoveries survive only as isolated pieces. Buildings collapse, written records decay, oral traditions evolve. Objects become separated from their original settings, leaving later generations to reconstruct stories using incomplete evidence. Every missing fragment introduces uncertainty, and every uncertainty creates room for competing interpretations. Standing before the Dashka stone today, it is easy to understand why the debate endures. Its carved surface appears deliberate enough to provoke careful examination, yet ambiguous enough to resist definitive answers. It encourages observation rather than certainty, inviting each viewer to notice details that others may overlook. Perhaps it represents an ingenious achievement by an ancient culture whose techniques remain poorly understood. Perhaps its patterns emerged through a combination of natural processes and human modification. Or perhaps the greatest mystery lies not within the stone itself, but within our continuing effort to distinguish meaningful evidence from compelling coincidence. Until clearer answers emerge, the Creator Map remains an enduring reminder that some artifacts reveal just enough to capture the imagination, while keeping their deepest secrets firmly locked in stone. If the Dashka stone leaves us wondering whether an ancient object can preserve knowledge in ways we still struggle to understand, the next mystery shifts our attention thousands of miles away into the cloud forests of South America. Here, the puzzle is not a single artifact, but an enormous collection of metallic objects whose origins have remained the subject of fascination, disagreement, and enduring speculation for decades. The city of Cuenca, Ecuador, rests among the Andes, surrounded by rolling mountains, winding rivers, and dense vegetation that gradually gives way to remote valleys. This landscape has supported human communities for thousands of years, preserving traces of numerous cultures whose artistic traditions, trade networks, and ceremonial practices continue to be studied today. Yet hidden within this familiar archaeological setting emerged a collection unlike almost any other. Rows of gleaming metal plates, intricately worked ornaments, elaborate ceremonial objects, sheets engraved with unfamiliar symbols, stylized figures that appeared to blend human and animal characteristics, decorative masks, weapons, crowns, countless pieces crafted from copper alloys, brass, gold-colored metals, and other materials. Together, they became known as the Crespi collection. At the center of the story stood Father Carlo Crespi, an Italian Catholic missionary and educator who arrived in Ecuador during the early 20th century. Deeply respected within the local community for his humanitarian work, he devoted much of his life to helping indigenous families, educating children, and supporting charitable projects throughout the region. Over many years, local residents began bringing him unusual objects. Some arrived as gifts offered in gratitude for his assistance. Others were exchanged in return for food, clothing, medicine, or financial support. According to those who knew him, Crespi rarely turned anyone away. Rather than carefully selecting only archaeologically significant pieces, he accepted nearly everything presented to him. As a result, his collection expanded into an extraordinary assortment containing thousands of artifacts of widely varying styles, ages, and craftsmanship. Some pieces clearly resembled known objects associated with pre-Columbian cultures of Ecuador. Pottery, stone carvings, ceremonial tools, and metalwork reflected artistic traditions already familiar to archaeologists. These artifacts fit comfortably within the region's established historical record. Other items proved far more difficult to categorize. Large metallic sheets engraved with geometric designs drew immediate attention. Several displayed rows of symbols that did not appear to match any widely recognized writing system native to the region. Others featured elaborate scenes containing radiant figures, unusual animals, celestial motifs, and architectural forms unlike those commonly associated with known South American civilizations. Could these engraved plates preserve the memory of an unknown culture? Or were they products of more recent craftsmanship inspired by diverse artistic influences? Those questions continue to shape discussion surrounding the collection. Supporters of more unconventional interpretations point to similarities they believe exist between certain engraved symbols and scripts found in distant parts of the ancient world. Some claim to recognize visual echoes of writing systems from Mesopotamia or Egypt. Others argue that a handful of designs resemble motifs associated with civilizations separated by vast oceans. If genuine, such similarities would suggest contacts between societies that conventional archaeology does not currently recognize. How could artistic traditions separated by continents display comparable symbols? Were these similarities meaningful connections, independent inventions, or simply the result of human beings repeatedly producing comparable geometric forms? Mainstream archaeologists generally urge caution. They note that geometric symbols are among the most common artistic elements ever created. Triangles, circles, spirals, crosses, parallel lines, and stylized figures appear independently in cultures throughout the world. without additional evidence placing such symbols within a verified linguistic or historical context. Visual resemblance alone cannot establish direct cultural contact. The circumstances surrounding the collection itself add another layer of complexity. Unlike artifacts recovered during controlled archaeological excavations, many Crespi collection objects lack documented provenance. In archaeology, provenance refers to the precise record of where an artifact was discovered, the depth at which it was found, nearby objects, surrounding soil layers, and other contextual information. That information often proves just as valuable as the artifact itself. Because many pieces entered Crespi's collection through informal donations over several decades, those details were frequently never recorded. This absence of context makes reliable interpretation extremely difficult. An object may indeed be ancient, yet without knowing exactly where it originated, determining its purpose, cultural affiliation, or age becomes far more uncertain. The Crespi collection therefore presents historians with an unusual challenge: a vast number of intriguing objects, accompanied by relatively little documented archaeological information. Among the most persistent stories associated with the collection are claims that some artifacts originated from an immense underground network of tunnels beneath Ecuador. These accounts became especially popular after explorers described reports of enormous subterranean chambers supposedly containing metallic libraries, carved stone monuments, and carefully preserved historical records. The most famous of these stories became connected with the so-called Cave of the Tayos, a real cave system that has attracted scientific expeditions as well as speculative interpretations for decades. The cave itself unquestionably exists. Its extensive passages, impressive chambers, and challenging terrain have been explored by numerous researchers. Scientific expeditions have documented its geology, ecology, and archaeological significance. However, no expedition has verified the existence of vast metallic libraries or hidden repositories matching the more extraordinary descriptions. Even so, the legend refuses to disappear. Some researchers propose that if underground ceremonial chambers or storage sites once existed, many could remain undiscovered beneath dense forests or inaccessible mountain terrain. South America's archaeological landscape continues to produce remarkable discoveries each decade, reminding scholars that many ancient settlements remain hidden beneath vegetation or buried beneath centuries of natural accumulation. Another source of fascination involves the remarkable diversity of craftsmanship within the collection. Certain objects display refined metalworking techniques comparable to known indigenous traditions. Others appear relatively simple. A few possess stylistic characteristics that seem difficult to place within any single artistic tradition. This variation has prompted differing interpretations. Some specialists believe the collection represents an eclectic mixture assembled from numerous local communities over many decades, naturally resulting in a wide range of artistic styles and manufacturing techniques. Others argue that at least a small number of artifacts deserve much closer scientific examination, suggesting that their origins may not yet be fully understood. Unfortunately, another chapter of the story complicates matters even further. In 1962, a devastating fire damaged portions of the building where much of the collection had been stored. Reports indicate that many objects were destroyed, while others suffered significant damage. Additional pieces later became dispersed among museums, private collections, and storage facilities, making comprehensive study increasingly difficult. As years passed, the collection gradually acquired an almost legendary reputation. Books, documentaries, and independent researchers frequently highlighted its most unusual pieces, sometimes presenting them as possible evidence for forgotten civilizations or unexpected cultural connections. Critics responded that extraordinary conclusions require equally extraordinary evidence, emphasizing the importance of careful archaeological documentation before rewriting accepted historical narratives. Between these perspectives lies a quieter reality. The Crespi collection unquestionably existed. Thousands of objects were assembled through Father Carlo Crespi's lifelong interactions with local communities. Many artifacts were authentic examples of indigenous craftsmanship. Others remain difficult to classify with confidence because so much of their original context has been lost. Perhaps that uncertainty explains why the collection continues to captivate historians, explorers, and curious observers alike. Every engraved plate, every metallic figure, and every unidentified symbol represents an unanswered question rather than a finished story. Some pieces may eventually find clear explanations through advances in archaeological research, materials analysis, or newly discovered excavation sites. Others may remain permanently detached from the people who created them. For now, the Crespi collection occupies a place where documented history, fragmented evidence, and enduring mystery intersect. Somewhere within that remarkable assembly of metal, craftsmanship, and unanswered questions may lie forgotten chapters of the human journey, or perhaps only reminders of how much can be lost when objects outlive the stories that once gave them meaning. If the Crespi collection reminds us how easily the past can become fragmented when artifacts lose their original context, the next mystery takes that uncertainty one step further. This time, the focus is not a metal object or a carved stone, but a document that may have existed only briefly before slipping beyond the reach of history. Whether authentic, misunderstood, or entirely misplaced, its story continues to provoke quiet fascination. Among the countless treasures once preserved along the banks of the Nile, few materials carried greater importance than papyrus. Fragile yet remarkably durable in Egypt's dry climate, these carefully prepared sheets preserved royal decrees, religious hymns, scientific observations, and records of daily life. Every surviving fragment offers a rare glimpse into a civilization that documented its world with extraordinary precision. The mystery known today as the Tulli Papyrus begins not with an archaeological excavation, but with an unexpected encounter in Cairo during the early 20th century. According to the most widely repeated account, Alberto Tulli, who later became director of the Vatican Egyptian Museum, was visiting an antiquities dealer when he noticed an unusual papyrus. The asking price was reportedly too high for him to purchase it, but he is said to have copied the text by hand before leaving. From that transcription, a remarkable story would eventually emerge. The translated text describes an event said to have occurred during the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose III, one of ancient Egypt's most powerful rulers. As the account unfolds, royal scribes reportedly observed unusual objects appearing in the sky. They were described as circular forms without visible heads, glowing brilliantly and moving silently above the land. According to the narrative, the mysterious objects increased in number over several days. Witnesses allegedly watched them travel across the heavens with a brightness greater than the sun itself. Eventually, the account claims they moved toward the south before disappearing into the distance, while fish and birds behaved unusually, and the pharaoh ordered incense to be burned in honor of the gods before recording the extraordinary event for posterity. It is an account unlike most surviving Egyptian records. Supporters of unconventional interpretations have suggested that the text represents one of the oldest documented sightings of unidentified aerial phenomena. The description of luminous objects moving without sound has drawn comparisons with modern reports, encouraging speculation that similar unexplained events may have been witnessed thousands of years ago. Yet, significant questions surround the document itself. No verified original papyrus matching this description has ever been presented for scholarly examination. Historians have searched extensively for evidence confirming its existence, but only later copies and translations appear to survive. Without the original manuscript, experts cannot analyze the handwriting, materials, dating, or archaeological context that would normally help establish authenticity. Some Egyptologists have proposed more conventional explanations for the reported events. Ancient writers frequently described astronomical phenomena using symbolic language. Bright comets, meteors, atmospheric effects, or unusual celestial events could easily have inspired dramatic descriptions intended for royal records. Religious imagery also played a central role in Egyptian writing, making literal interpretation especially difficult. Others have questioned whether the transcription itself may contain errors introduced through repeated copying or translation. Every time an ancient document passes through another hand, subtle changes can appear. Words shift in meaning, symbols become uncertain, and details may gradually evolve, especially when the original source is unavailable. Whether the Tulli Papyrus preserves an authentic observation, a misunderstood historical record, or a story transformed through decades of retelling remains impossible to determine with certainty. Yet, its enduring appeal lies not only in what it describes, but in what can no longer be verified. Somewhere between the written word and the passage of time, the original truth, whatever it may have been, seems to have faded, leaving behind a mystery that continues to invite careful reflection. That uncertainty has encouraged researchers to look beyond the story itself and examine the historical setting in which the reported event was said to have occurred. Thutmose III ruled during one of ancient Egypt's most prosperous periods, leading successful military campaigns, expanding trade routes, and overseeing an administration known for its careful record-keeping. Temples, monuments, and official inscriptions from his reign demonstrate a culture that placed enormous value on documenting significant events. If an unusual phenomenon truly captured the attention of royal scribes, it is reasonable to ask whether traces of it might exist somewhere beyond the disputed papyrus. So far, no widely accepted Egyptian inscription has been identified that clearly mirrors the account attributed to the Tulli Papyrus. This absence has become one of the strongest arguments presented by skeptical historians. Important events involving the pharaoh were often recorded in multiple places, particularly if they were believed to reflect divine favor or heavenly signs. A solitary account with no confirmed parallel naturally raises questions about its origin. Even so, history contains many examples of documents surviving only as copies. Entire libraries have disappeared through war, fire, and the slow passage of time, leaving later generations dependent on handwritten transcriptions made centuries after the originals were lost. Classical literature provides numerous examples in which the earliest surviving version of a text was copied long after the original composition. The existence of only a transcription does not automatically prove a document false, but it does make verification far more difficult. The wording attributed to the Tulli Papyrus has also attracted close attention from linguists. Certain phrases appear poetic, reflecting the symbolic style common in Egyptian literature. References to brilliant light, movement across the heavens, and the reaction of the pharaoh fit comfortably within the broader tradition of recording extraordinary natural or religious events. Ancient Egyptian scribes often blended observation with spiritual interpretation, viewing unusual occurrences as messages from the gods rather than isolated physical phenomena. Could a spectacular astronomical event have inspired the account? Some researchers have suggested that an exceptionally bright meteor shower, a comet, or even a rare atmospheric display might explain descriptions of glowing objects moving through the sky. Under unfamiliar conditions, multiple meteors appearing over consecutive nights could easily leave a profound impression on observers who interpreted the heavens through a religious worldview. Others have proposed more unusual possibilities. Since the middle of the 20th century, the Tulli Papyrus has frequently appeared in discussions surrounding unidentified aerial phenomena. Supporters of this interpretation argue that the reported silence, controlled movement, and repeated appearances differ from ordinary celestial events. They view the account as part of a much larger pattern of mysterious sky observations recorded throughout human history. Yet those conclusions remain speculative. Without the original papyrus, every interpretation rests upon uncertain foundations. Even small translation choices can dramatically influence how a passage is understood. A single ancient word might describe brightness, fire, divinity, or an unfamiliar object depending on its context. Remove the original document from the equation, and certainty becomes increasingly elusive. Perhaps that is why the Tulli Papyrus continues to occupy such a unique place among historical mysteries. It does not rely on a physical artifact that can be measured or tested, but on the fragile survival of written memory itself. Somewhere between an alleged ancient record, an incomplete transcription, and decades of interpretation lies a story that refuses to settle into a single explanation. Whether it preserves an authentic observation or reflects the evolution of a remarkable legend remains unknown. And that unanswered question continues to echo through the corridors of history. If the mystery of the Tulli Papyrus reminds us how easily a story can survive even when its original source is gone, the next artifact presents the opposite challenge. Here, the object itself is undeniably real, resting safely under controlled conditions, examined by scientists from multiple disciplines. Yet despite its authenticity, one question continues to linger. How did people living thousands of years ago possess such a sophisticated understanding of the sky? The Sky Disk of Nebra does not immediately appear extraordinary. At first glance, it is simply a weathered bronze circle, about 12 inches in diameter, its once smooth surface now covered with the rich green patina that centuries often leave behind. Scattered across that darkened bronze are delicate gold inlays, circles, crescents, sweeping arcs, and clusters of tiny golden dots that shimmer beneath museum lighting, much as they must have reflected sunlight long ago. It is an object that invites quiet observation. The longer one studies its surface, the more intentional every detail appears. The disk is named after the town of Nebra in present-day Germany, near a wooded hill known as the Mittelberg. This peaceful landscape, surrounded by rolling fields and gentle forests, gives little indication that it once served as an important location during Europe's Bronze Age. Yet archaeological discoveries throughout the region reveal that ancient communities gathered here for purposes that are still not fully understood. The story of the disk's discovery is almost as remarkable as the artifact itself. In 1999, treasure hunters using metal detectors illegally uncovered the bronze disk, along with several bronze swords, axes, arm rings, and a chisel. Rather than reporting the find, they removed the objects and attempted to sell them on the black market. During the following years, the disk passed through several private hands before authorities recovered it during a police operation in Switzerland. Fortunately, despite the damage caused during its removal from the ground, scientists were eventually able to examine it in detail. Laboratory analysis confirmed that the object was ancient. The bronze, gold, and surrounding artifacts all pointed toward the European Bronze Age, with most researchers placing its creation around 1600 BC. Chemical analysis traced the copper to alpine mining regions, while isotopic studies suggested that much of the gold originated from deposits in what is now Cornwall, England. These findings painted a picture of extensive trade networks stretching across large parts of prehistoric Europe. Such connections alone were impressive, but it was the imagery engraved upon the disk that truly transformed it into one of archaeology's most fascinating discoveries. The largest golden circle has often been interpreted as either the sun or a full moon. Nearby rests a slender crescent, almost certainly representing a different lunar phase. Surrounding them are dozens of smaller golden circles, generally understood to symbolize stars. Among these, one cluster immediately draws attention. 7 closely grouped stars appear in a pattern remarkably similar to the Pleiades, one of the most recognizable star clusters visible to the naked eye. For thousands of years, cultures throughout the world observed the Pleiades to mark changing seasons, agricultural cycles, and ceremonial calendars. Was that also the purpose of the Nebra disk? Many archaeologists believe it may have functioned as an astronomical instrument rather than simple decoration. Detailed studies suggest that the arrangement of celestial symbols reflects careful observation of the heavens. Even more intriguing are 2 golden arcs positioned along opposite edges of the disk. Researchers have proposed that these arcs correspond closely to the angle between the points where the sun rises and sets during the summer and winter solstices at the latitude where the disk was discovered. If that interpretation is correct, the disk could have served as a practical guide for tracking the solar year. Such knowledge would have carried enormous importance. Accurately identifying seasonal transitions allowed agricultural societies to determine when to plant crops, prepare harvests, and organize ceremonial events. A reliable understanding of celestial cycles could strengthen an entire community's survival. Yet the Nebra disk appears to represent something more sophisticated than a simple seasonal calendar. Evidence indicates that the artifact underwent several modifications during its lifetime. Additional gold elements were carefully added after its original creation. One broad curved feature near the bottom has often been interpreted as a solar barge, a symbolic vessel believed in several ancient traditions to carry the sun across the heavens. Whether this interpretation is correct remains debated, but the sequence of modifications suggests the disk evolved over generations rather than remaining a static object. Its changing appearance raises an intriguing possibility. Did different communities reinterpret its meaning over time? Could each edition reflect new astronomical observations, evolving religious beliefs, or changing ceremonial practices? The artifact offers no written explanation. Its silence leaves modern researchers to reconstruct its purpose from careful measurement, experimental archaeology, and comparisons with other Bronze Age discoveries. While mainstream scholarship generally agrees that the disk reflects advanced astronomical knowledge, more speculative interpretations extend much further. Some writers argue that its precision demonstrates an unexpectedly sophisticated scientific tradition whose origins remain unknown. Others suggest it preserves fragments of knowledge inherited from much older cultures, whose achievements have largely disappeared from the archaeological record. A few even propose that the disk represents evidence of contact with highly advanced civilizations existing long before accepted historical timelines. Such ideas remain outside the archaeological consensus. Researchers emphasize that remarkable accomplishments do not necessarily require mysterious origins. Bronze Age societies possessed generations of accumulated observational experience. Careful sky watching over centuries could gradually produce highly accurate calendars without telescopes or modern mathematics. Indeed, the Nebra disk may illustrate exactly how deeply ancient communities studied the natural world. Even so, certain questions remain difficult to answer. Why was such an elaborate object buried alongside valuable weapons and ceremonial items? The location where it was found suggests deliberate deposition rather than accidental loss. Some archaeologists believe the objects formed part of a ritual offering. Others suggest they marked the retirement of sacred items no longer intended for ordinary use. If so, what ceremony accompanied that final burial? Who carried the disk to the hilltop? Who decided that such a remarkable object should disappear beneath the earth? The people responsible left no written testimony. Only the artifacts remain. Modern technology has continued revealing new details. Microscopic analysis has identified manufacturing marks left by Bronze Age craftsmen. Wear patterns indicate that the disk was handled repeatedly rather than stored untouched. Experimental reproductions demonstrate the extraordinary skill required to shape bronze, hammer delicate gold sheets, and secure each element with remarkable precision. Every scientific examination strengthens confidence in the artifact's authenticity. Paradoxically, each answer seems to generate new mysteries. The Sky Disk of Nebra has fundamentally changed how historians view prehistoric Europe. It demonstrates that communities living more than 3,000 years ago possessed astronomical knowledge far more sophisticated than once imagined. It reveals long-distance trade, specialized craftsmanship, and symbolic traditions whose complexity continues to surprise researchers. Yet its deepest purpose remains just beyond complete understanding. Was it a ceremonial object reserved for priests? A practical astronomical teaching tool? A sacred representation of the cosmos? Or something combining all of these roles in ways modern categories fail to capture? As the golden symbols continue reflecting light much as they did thousands of years ago, the disk offers neither confirmation nor denial. Instead, it quietly preserves the observations, beliefs, and ambitions of people who watched the same night sky we see today. Their voices have long since fallen silent, but the celestial map they left behind continues to ask a timeless question. How much ancient knowledge still waits to be recognized, hidden within objects that have survived while the stories explaining them have slowly faded away? That lingering question has inspired researchers to examine the sky disk from every possible perspective, using techniques that its creators could scarcely have imagined. High-resolution imaging, metallurgical analysis, and microscopic examination have revealed tiny details invisible to the naked eye, allowing scientists to reconstruct not only how the disk was made, but also how it changed over the course of its existence. One of the most revealing discoveries concerns the sequence of its construction. The gold symbols were not all attached at the same time. Instead, careful analysis shows that the disk passed through several distinct phases. The earliest version appears to have included the large circular symbol, the crescent, and the cluster of stars. Only later were the two horizon arcs added, followed by the curved feature near the bottom. Eventually, several stars were removed to make room for these new elements. This gradual transformation suggests that the disk remained significant over many years, perhaps even generations. Why would an object be repeatedly modified instead of replaced? Some archaeologists believe the additions reflect an evolving understanding of astronomy. As knowledge improved, the artifact may have been updated to incorporate more sophisticated observations. Others suggest the changes marked shifts in ritual traditions, with each generation adapting the disk to fit new beliefs while preserving its original importance. The craftsmanship itself continues to impress specialists. Bronze Age metalworkers lacked modern furnaces, precision tools, or advanced measuring instruments. Yet they succeeded in producing an object whose proportions remain remarkably balanced. The thin sheets of gold were carefully hammered, trimmed, and secured with exceptional precision. Every element appears intentionally positioned, indicating planning rather than improvisation. Creating such an artifact required far more than artistic talent. It demanded knowledge of metallurgy, access to valuable raw materials, and the ability to coordinate skilled craftsmen within a society capable of supporting specialized labor. These qualities point toward communities that were socially and economically more organized than earlier generations of historians once assumed. The disk has also encouraged comparisons with ancient monuments elsewhere in Europe. Stone circles, ceremonial enclosures, and hilltop sanctuaries often display alignments with the rising or setting sun during key moments of the year. While these sites differ greatly in form and age, they share a common theme: careful observation of the heavens. The Nebra disk may represent a portable expression of that same tradition, condensing generations of astronomical knowledge into a single symbolic object. Still, not every researcher agrees on its exact purpose. Some argue that the disk should not be viewed as a scientific instrument in the modern sense. Instead, they suggest it functioned primarily as a sacred object, with celestial imagery serving symbolic or religious roles rather than practical ones. In many ancient cultures, astronomy and spirituality were deeply intertwined. Tracking the movements of the sun, moon, and stars was not simply about measuring time. It was about understanding humanity's place within a much larger cosmic order. This perspective raises another intriguing possibility. Perhaps the sky disk was never intended to explain the heavens to ordinary people. It may have belonged to a select group whose responsibilities included observing celestial events, conducting seasonal ceremonies, or preserving knowledge passed down through generations. If so, the disk could represent only a small surviving fragment of a much broader tradition that has otherwise disappeared. Its final burial only deepens the mystery. The objects found beside it showed no signs of hurried concealment. Instead, many researchers believe they were deliberately placed in the ground with care. Similar ritual deposits have been discovered elsewhere in Europe, where valuable weapons, jewelry, and ceremonial items appear to have been offered rather than abandoned. If the Nebra disk formed part of such a ceremony, its burial may have marked the end of its active use, or perhaps the beginning of a symbolic journey understood only by those who performed the ritual. Thousands of years later, the hill where it rested surrendered its secret by chance. Yet even after decades of scientific study, the disk continues to balance comfortably between explanation and mystery. We now understand far more about its age, materials, and craftsmanship than when it first emerged from the soil. What remains far less certain is the world of ideas that gave it meaning. It is a reminder that archaeology often recovers objects more easily than beliefs. Bronze survives. Gold endures. But the conversations, ceremonies, and knowledge once surrounding those objects are far more fragile. They disappear long before the artifacts themselves. Perhaps that is why the Sky Disk of Nebra continues to captivate both scientists and the public alike. It does not challenge history by contradicting established evidence. Instead, it expands our appreciation for what ancient societies were capable of achieving. And somewhere within its carefully arranged symbols may still lie meanings that modern eyes have yet to fully recognize, waiting patiently beneath the same stars that inspired its creation so many centuries ago. If the Sky Disk of Nebra reveals that ancient societies often understood the heavens with far greater sophistication than once imagined, the next mystery shifts our attention from the skies to a collection of tiny golden objects whose shapes continue to challenge interpretation. They are small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, yet their unusual forms have inspired debates that reach far beyond the museums where they are carefully preserved today. Deep within the lush valleys and forested mountains of western Colombia, rivers have carved their way through fertile landscapes for thousands of years. Long before European explorers arrived, skilled metalworkers flourished here, producing some of the most remarkable gold craftsmanship in the ancient Americas. Their creations reflected not only extraordinary artistic ability, but also deeply rooted spiritual traditions, where precious metals carried symbolic meaning far beyond material wealth. Among the many surviving works attributed to these cultures, a handful of artifacts stand apart from the rest. Known collectively as the Quimbaya gold figures, these small objects are usually only a few inches long. Cast in gold or tumbaga, a traditional alloy of gold and copper, they possess polished surfaces, carefully balanced proportions, and an unmistakable sense of precision. At first glance, they resemble stylized animals. Yet the longer they are examined, the more difficult they become to classify with confidence. Some appear to have sharply swept-back wings. Others feature triangular fins, upright vertical tails, and streamlined bodies, unlike the forms typically seen in birds, fish, or insects. Their symmetry is striking, their contours remarkably smooth, and their overall appearance has led generations of observers to ask the same quiet question. What exactly were these figures meant to represent? The artifacts are generally associated with the Quimbaya culture, which flourished in parts of present-day Colombia between approximately AD 500 and AD 1000. The Quimbaya people developed highly advanced techniques for casting precious metals, creating ceremonial vessels, ornaments, jewelry, and symbolic figures admired for their elegance and technical sophistication. Modern metallurgical analysis has confirmed the remarkable skill of these craftsmen. Using methods such as the lost wax casting process, Quimbaya artisans produced intricate hollow objects with exceptional accuracy. Even by today's standards, many of their creations demonstrate impressive control over shape, proportion, and surface finish. Within this broader artistic tradition, however, the unusual gold figures remain among the most debated. Mainstream archaeologists generally interpret them as stylized representations of animals familiar to the region. Ancient artists often emphasized certain anatomical features while simplifying or exaggerating others for symbolic or ceremonial reasons. Birds, flying insects, fish, reptiles, and even bats have all been proposed as possible inspirations. This explanation reflects a well-established pattern found throughout ancient art. Symbolism frequently takes precedence over anatomical realism. Artists create forms that communicate meaning rather than scientific accuracy. Wings become larger, eyes grow more prominent, bodies become simplified to highlight qualities admired within a particular culture. Yet the Quimbaya figures continue to attract attention because several characteristics appear unusually mechanical. Unlike most birds, many display vertical tail surfaces resembling stabilizers. Their wings often appear flat rather than feathered. Some possess sharply defined noses that resemble pointed fuselages. Others exhibit proportions that seem unexpectedly aerodynamic. These observations have fueled more speculative interpretations. Supporters of unconventional theories argue that the figures resemble modern aircraft more closely than any known animal. During the 20th century, several aviation enthusiasts even constructed enlarged models based upon the artifacts. Equipped with engines and radio controls, these experimental replicas reportedly demonstrated stable flight characteristics under controlled conditions. For some observers, these demonstrations suggested that the ancient figures preserved knowledge of advanced flying machines. Others remained unconvinced. Aeronautical engineers point out that many basic aerodynamic shapes naturally produce stable flight. A simple triangular wing combined with a balanced tail can generate lift regardless of whether the original artist intended to depict an aircraft. Successful flight by a modern model, therefore, does not necessarily reveal the purpose of an ancient sculpture. The distinction is important. An object may resemble modern technology without having been inspired by it. Human beings often arrive independently at similar shapes because certain forms efficiently solve particular design challenges. Nature itself provides countless examples. Fish, dolphins, submarines, and torpedoes all share streamlined bodies, not because one copied another, but because similar environments reward similar solutions. Even so, the visual similarities continue to provoke discussion. Could Quimbaya artists have observed an animal whose appearance no longer survives in the modern world? Were the figures entirely symbolic, combining characteristics from several creatures into sacred representations understood only within their own culture? Or do they preserve ideas whose original meaning has simply been forgotten? Without written explanations from the Quimbaya themselves, certainty remains elusive. The circumstances surrounding many discoveries further complicate interpretation. Numerous Quimbaya artifacts were recovered during the 19th century, a period when archaeological methods were far less systematic than they are today. Treasure hunting often took precedence over careful excavation. Valuable objects were removed from burial sites with little documentation regarding their precise location or cultural context. As a result, historians sometimes possess the artifact, but lack the surrounding information needed to understand how it was originally used. Was a particular figure worn as jewelry, Placed inside a ceremonial offering? Buried alongside an important individual? Displayed during religious gatherings? Context often provides the answers, yet in many cases that context disappeared long before modern archaeological standards were established. The Quimbaya gold figures also highlight another important reality about ancient craftsmanship. Gold was rarely chosen simply because it was valuable. Throughout much of pre-Columbian South America, its reflective qualities connected it with sunlight, transformation, ancestry, and spiritual power. Objects fashioned from gold often carried ceremonial significance rather than economic value. Their appearance may therefore have conveyed ideas that extend beyond literal representation. Perhaps these figures were never intended to portray ordinary creatures at all. They may have represented mythological beings, spiritual messengers, or symbolic combinations of multiple animals whose significance has not survived through time. Researchers continue applying increasingly sophisticated analytical methods to the artifacts. Microscopic examination reveals manufacturing techniques used by Quimbaya metalworkers. Chemical analysis identifies alloy compositions and production methods. Comparative studies examine similar artistic traditions throughout northern South America, searching for recurring themes that might clarify their meaning. Each investigation contributes another small piece to the puzzle. None has produced a universally accepted explanation. That enduring uncertainty has allowed the Quimbaya gold figures to occupy a unique place in discussions of ancient mysteries. They stand at the intersection of archaeology, engineering, art history, mythology, and imagination. Unlike obvious hoaxes or undocumented legends, these objects unquestionably exist. They can be measured, photographed, analyzed, and displayed. Their authenticity is not the mystery. Their inspiration is. Perhaps they are elegant artistic interpretations of animals viewed through a cultural lens that modern observers no longer fully understand. Perhaps they preserve symbolic traditions whose meanings have faded with the passage of centuries. Or perhaps they remind us that ancient creativity often exceeded our expectations, producing designs that seem surprisingly familiar because innovation has always been part of the human story. As these tiny golden figures continue resting behind museum glass, their polished surfaces reflect more than light. They reflect our own desire to understand the minds of those who shaped them so many centuries ago. Whether they represent birds, sacred symbols, imaginative creations, or something entirely different, they quietly preserve a mystery that has resisted every confident explanation, and they leave us wondering how many other ancient masterpieces still conceal meanings waiting to be rediscovered. The debate surrounding the Quimbaya gold figures has continued for decades precisely because the artifacts invite careful observation rather than immediate certainty. Viewed from one angle, they resemble stylized creatures crafted by highly skilled artisans. Turn them slightly, however, and entirely different features begin to emerge. Sharp leading edges, symmetrical wings, and upright tail structures seem almost deliberate, encouraging each generation to examine them through the lens of its own knowledge. Museums housing these objects generally present them within the broader context of Quimbaya art, emphasizing the remarkable achievements of the culture's metalworkers. From an archaeological perspective, this interpretation remains the most strongly supported by available evidence. The Quimbaya were masters of artistic abstraction, often transforming familiar animals into elegant symbolic forms. Similar artistic conventions appear throughout many ancient cultures, where realism gave way to meaning and spiritual expression. Yet some of the figures remain unusually difficult to compare with any single known species. Several researchers have attempted detailed anatomical studies, matching the proportions of the artifacts against birds native to Colombia, flying insects, bats, and various species of fish. Certain similarities can certainly be found, but no comparison explains every feature perfectly. A bird may account for the wings, but not the vertical tail. A fish may resemble the body, but not the apparent lifting surfaces. Each proposal answers some questions while leaving others unresolved. This ambiguity has kept the discussion alive. During the late 20th century, engineers interested in aerodynamics examined replicas of several figures with professional curiosity. Rather than attempting to prove extraordinary theories, some simply wanted to understand whether the shapes possessed genuine aerodynamic properties. Wind tunnel experiments and radio-controlled models demonstrated that, with appropriate scaling and propulsion, some designs could achieve stable flight. These experiments attracted widespread public attention. To many observers, the results seemed astonishing. If enlarged versions could fly efficiently, did that suggest the original artisans understood aerodynamic principles? Most aerospace specialists urge restraint in drawing such conclusions. A shape that performs well in flight does not necessarily indicate that it was designed as an aircraft. Nature itself has refined efficient forms over millions of years, and skilled artists often capture those forms with remarkable accuracy. Human intuition can also produce balanced designs without formal scientific knowledge. The ability of a model to fly, therefore, remains an interesting observation rather than definitive evidence of advanced technology. Another important question concerns intention. What mattered most to the Quimbaya craftsmen who created these figures? Modern viewers often focus on appearance alone, but ancient artisans frequently embedded multiple layers of meaning within a single object. A ceremonial ornament could represent an animal, a spiritual belief, social status, and ancestral identity simultaneously. What appears to modern eyes as a technical design may once have carried entirely symbolic significance. The passage of time has erased much of that cultural framework. Unlike civilizations that left extensive written records, the Quimbaya communicated their beliefs primarily through oral tradition and material culture. As generations passed, languages evolved, traditions faded, and many ceremonial practices disappeared. The objects survived, but the voices capable of fully explaining them did not. Archaeologists continue uncovering evidence that broadens our understanding of pre-Columbian societies throughout South America. Sophisticated urban planning, advanced agricultural systems, complex trade networks, and remarkable engineering achievements have all emerged from recent discoveries. Each finding reminds us that earlier assumptions often underestimated the ingenuity of these cultures. The Quimbaya gold figures fit naturally within that larger story. Whether viewed as artistic masterpieces, ceremonial symbols, or enduring puzzles, they testify to a society whose craftsmanship reached extraordinary levels of refinement. They encourage curiosity without demanding extraordinary conclusions, allowing the mystery to remain grounded in authentic history while acknowledging that not every question has yet found a satisfying answer. Perhaps one day, a newly excavated site, an overlooked artifact, or an unexpected archaeological discovery will provide the missing context needed to interpret these remarkable objects with greater confidence. Until then, their graceful golden forms continue to balance delicately between certainty and speculation, reminding us that the smallest artifacts can sometimes inspire the largest questions about humanity's distant past. If the Quimbaya gold figures remind us that even the smallest objects can preserve mysteries that outlive the cultures that created them, the next discovery shifts our attention from finely crafted metal to three modest pieces of clay. They are neither dazzling nor elaborate, yet their markings have prompted one of archaeology's most enduring debates. Their mystery does not lie in precious materials or remarkable engineering, but in the possibility that they may preserve one of humanity's earliest attempts to communicate through symbols. In the quiet countryside of modern-day Romania, gentle hills stretch toward the horizon, interrupted by rivers, fertile fields, and scattered forests. At first glance, the landscape appears peaceful and unremarkable. Yet beneath these fields lie the remains of settlements built thousands of years before the rise of the great kingdoms of Egypt or Mesopotamia. For generations, farmers worked this land without realizing that fragments of an astonishing prehistoric world rested just below the soil. One of those discoveries would become known as the Tărtăria Tablets. In 1961, Romanian archaeologist Nicolae Vlasa excavated a Neolithic site near the village of Tărtăria. Among the artifacts recovered were 3 small clay tablets, unlike anything previously found in the region. 2 were rectangular, 1 was circular, and each bore carefully incised symbols arranged in deliberate patterns. Nearby lay the cremated remains of an adult individual, accompanied by ritual objects and ornaments that suggested the burial held special significance. The tablets themselves are surprisingly small. Each can fit comfortably in the palm of a hand. Their surfaces contain lines, geometric figures, crosses, branching shapes, and abstract symbols separated into organized sections. Tiny perforations suggest they may once have been suspended, perhaps worn as pendants or displayed during ceremonial activities. At first glance, the markings appear simple. The longer they are examined, however, the more intentional they seem. Were these merely decorative motifs, religious symbols, property marks? Or could they represent something even more remarkable? Almost immediately after their discovery, comparisons began emerging between the Tărtăria symbols and the earliest writing systems of ancient Mesopotamia. Several signs appeared visually similar to characters found on proto-cuneiform tablets from the ancient city of Uruk. If those similarities reflected genuine writing rather than coincidence, the implications would be extraordinary. Radiocarbon dating associated with the surrounding archaeological layer suggested an age of roughly 5,300 BC, making the tablets potentially more than 1,000 years older than the earliest widely accepted examples of writing from Mesopotamia. Such a possibility challenged one of archaeology's most fundamental assumptions. For generations, historians regarded Mesopotamia as the birthplace of writing, where increasingly complex societies developed systems for recording trade, administration, and religious activity. If the Tărtăria tablets truly contained written language from an earlier period, the origins of literacy might require significant reconsideration. Yet almost from the beginning, the discovery became the subject of intense debate. One complication involved the tablets themselves. After excavation, they were reportedly baked to preserve them, a common archaeological practice at the time. Unfortunately, this process altered the clay, making direct thermoluminescence dating impossible. Researchers therefore had to rely primarily on dating the surrounding archaeological context rather than the tablets themselves. That distinction proved important. Some scholars questioned whether the tablets had remained undisturbed within their original layer. Others suggested they might have been introduced into the burial through later activity, potentially affecting estimates of their true age. Even if the dating is accepted, another question remains. Do the symbols actually represent writing? Many linguists distinguish between true writing and symbolic communication. Writing records spoken language through standardized signs capable of expressing complex ideas. Symbolic systems, by contrast, may convey religious concepts, ownership, identity, or ritual meaning without representing speech itself. The Tărtăria tablets occupy an uncertain space between these definitions. Supporters of the writing hypothesis argue that the careful organization of symbols into structured groups resembles early administrative tablets elsewhere in the ancient world. The repeated use of certain signs suggests intentional conventions rather than random decoration. Others remain unconvinced. Abstract symbols appear throughout prehistoric Europe on pottery, figurines, stone carvings, and ceremonial objects. Many archaeologists interpret these designs as components of symbolic traditions shared among Neolithic communities, rather than evidence of written language. The broader archaeological culture associated with the tablets offers additional context. The site is generally connected with the Vinča culture, a remarkable Neolithic society that flourished across parts of southeastern Europe between approximately 5700 BC and 4500 BC. These communities constructed substantial settlements, practiced agriculture, produced sophisticated ceramics, and created thousands of objects bearing engraved symbols. Known collectively as the Vinci signs, these markings appear on pottery, figurines, spindle whorls, and ritual artifacts discovered across a wide geographical area. Their purpose remains one of European prehistory's greatest unanswered questions. Some researchers believe they formed a symbolic system used in religious ceremonies or community identity. Others suggest they functioned as ownership marks or artisan signatures. A smaller number continue exploring the possibility that they represent an early stage in the development of writing itself. The similarities with Mesopotamian symbols have generated further discussion. Did ideas travel gradually between distant communities through long-distance exchange networks? Could separate societies have independently developed comparable systems because human minds often organize information in similar ways? Or are the apparent similarities simply coincidental, reflecting the limited number of simple geometric forms available to early artists? No definitive answer has emerged. Modern technology has provided new avenues of investigation. Digital imaging allows researchers to compare thousands of ancient symbols with unprecedented precision. Statistical analysis examines recurring patterns. Archaeologists continue uncovering additional Vinci artifacts bearing related markings, expanding the available evidence with each new excavation. Despite these advances, consensus remains elusive. Every new discovery contributes valuable information while introducing additional complexities. The Tărtăria Tablets also remind us how fragile archaeological interpretation can be. 3 small pieces of clay have inspired decades of international debate, not because they provide obvious answers, but because they sit at the intersection of several profound questions. When did symbolic thought evolve into writing? How many independent centers of innovation existed during prehistory? How much sophisticated knowledge has disappeared simply because the materials carrying it failed to survive? Perhaps even more intriguing is the burial itself. Why were the tablets placed beside the cremated individual? Did they identify the deceased? Were they ceremonial objects intended to accompany someone into the afterlife? Or did they preserve information considered sacred, entrusted to a single individual whose role has long since been forgotten? No surviving tradition explains their purpose. The people who created them left no known descendants capable of interpreting their meaning with certainty. Today, the Tărtăria Tablets remain modest in appearance, but immense in significance. They remind us that history is not always rewritten by towering monuments or spectacular treasures. Sometimes, the greatest mysteries emerge from objects small enough to rest unnoticed in the palm of a hand. Their carefully carved symbols continue to resist confident translation, preserving a silence that has endured for more than 7,000 years. Whether they represent humanity's earliest written thoughts, sacred ritual signs, or something entirely different, they continue to invite a simple yet profound question. How many voices from the distant past are still waiting for someone to finally understand what they were trying to say? That unanswered question has inspired generations of archaeologists, linguists, and historians to revisit the Tărtăria Tablets with fresh eyes. Every few years, new analytical techniques or newly excavated artifacts renew the discussion, yet the central mystery remains remarkably resistant to resolution. Rather than fading with time, the tablets seem to grow more intriguing as our understanding of Europe's Neolithic cultures continues to evolve. One reason for this fascination is that the Vinci culture itself has steadily challenged older assumptions about prehistoric societies. Excavations throughout southeastern Europe have revealed settlements far larger and more organized than researchers once expected. Some communities contained hundreds of houses arranged according to recognizable layouts. Evidence of specialized craftsmanship, long-distance exchange, copperworking, and sophisticated pottery production points toward societies capable of considerable social organization long before the emergence of the great Bronze Age kingdoms. Within such communities, symbols may have served increasingly important purposes. As settlements expanded and trade became more complex, people likely needed reliable ways to identify ownership, mark ceremonial objects, distinguish families, or communicate ideas across generations. Whether those needs eventually produced true writing remains one of archaeology's most compelling questions. The tablets sit precisely at that crossroads. Some researchers have examined the arrangement of the symbols rather than the symbols themselves. They note that several signs appear intentionally grouped instead of scattered randomly across the surface. This structured layout resembles the organization seen in later writing systems, where information follows recognizable patterns instead of purely decorative compositions. Could organization itself be an important clue? Perhaps. Yet organization alone cannot confirm the existence of language. Human beings naturally arrange visual information in meaningful ways, even when no written words are involved. Religious emblems, ceremonial diagrams, and artistic compositions often display careful structure without recording spoken speech. Another intriguing detail involves repetition. Across numerous Vinca artifacts discovered over many decades, certain symbols appear again and again. Crosses, chevrons, comb-like patterns, branching lines, and enclosed geometric figures recur at sites separated by considerable distances. Such consistency suggests that these markings carried shared meanings understood by the communities that created them. What those meanings were, however, remains uncertain. They may have identified clans, represented spiritual concepts, marked ownership, or indicated ritual functions. Each possibility fits the available evidence to some degree, yet none explains every example. The absence of bilingual inscriptions presents another challenge. The famous Rosetta Stone unlocked Egyptian hieroglyphs because it preserved the same message in multiple scripts. No comparable key exists for the Tărtăria symbols or the broader Vinca sign system. Without a known translation for comparison, researchers cannot confidently assign sounds or words to individual signs. As a result, every proposed interpretation remains tentative. Some scholars have attempted statistical analysis, comparing the frequency and sequence of Vinca symbols with confirmed writing systems. Others argue that the available sample is simply too small to support meaningful conclusions. 3 tablets and scattered markings across pottery cannot easily reveal the grammatical structure expected of a fully developed language. Even so, the mystery continues to inspire thoughtful debate rather than easy dismissal. History has repeatedly shown that major breakthroughs often begin with incomplete evidence. Archaeological discoveries rarely arrive fully explained. Instead, they emerge piece by piece, sometimes over decades, gradually revealing patterns that earlier generations could not yet recognize. The Tărtăria Tablets remind us that the story of human communication may be far more complex than a single place or moment of invention. Ideas can emerge independently, spread through cultural contact, or evolve gradually over centuries before leaving behind unmistakable written records. Innovation rarely follows a perfectly straight path. Perhaps that is the true significance of these modest clay objects. They encourage us to look beyond familiar timelines and appreciate how much remains unknown about the earliest chapters of organized human thought. Whether they preserve the first fragile steps toward writing or represent an entirely different symbolic tradition, they testify to minds already seeking ways to preserve meaning beyond the spoken word. More than 7,000 years have passed since their symbols were carefully pressed into soft clay. The hands that shaped them have long since disappeared, their language, if language it was, silent for countless generations. Yet those small markings continue to invite patient observation, resisting every attempt at definitive interpretation. Until new discoveries provide the missing pieces, the Tărtăria Tablets remain suspended between certainty and possibility, quietly reminding us that some of humanity's oldest messages may still be waiting, not to be found, but to be understood. If the Tărtăria Tablets leave us wondering whether humanity experimented with symbolic communication far earlier than once believed, the next mystery draws us to the edge of a quiet lake, where another remarkable discovery raises strikingly similar questions. Unlike clay, however, this artifact was carved into wood, a material rarely granted the privilege of surviving for thousands of years. Its very existence is remarkable, and the symbols etched across its surface continue to challenge researchers searching for the earliest origins of written expression. In northern Greece, surrounded by gentle mountains and broad stretches of fertile land, Lake Orestiada lies in peaceful silence. Mist often drifts across its surface during the early morning hours, softening the outlines of reeds and distant hills. Beneath these calm waters rests the memory of a settlement that flourished thousands of years ago, long before cities, kingdoms, or monumental architecture dominated the landscape. Today, little remains visible above the shoreline. Yet hidden beneath layers of mud and waterlogged sediment, archaeologists uncovered traces of an extraordinary Neolithic community whose remarkable state of preservation has transformed our understanding of prehistoric Europe. This settlement is known as Dispilio. Unlike many ancient villages that survive only as scattered stone foundations, Dispilio preserved organic materials rarely found at archaeological sites. Wooden posts, woven plant fibers, seeds, tools, fragments of baskets, and even structural elements remained protected beneath oxygen-poor sediments that slowed the natural process of decay. Among these discoveries, one object immediately stood apart. It was a small wooden tablet. Modest in appearance, darkened by thousands of years beneath the lakebed, the artifact measured only a few inches across. Time had weathered its surface, yet carefully incised lines and geometric symbols remained visible. Although simple at first glance, the arrangement of these markings suggested deliberate intention rather than random decoration. The object would become known as the Dispilio Tablet. It was discovered in 1993 during excavations led by archaeologist George Ormuziadis, whose work revealed one of Europe's most important prehistoric lakeside settlements. Radiocarbon dating placed the tablet at approximately 5,200 BC, making it one of the oldest known wooden objects bearing organized symbols ever recovered. Its age alone would have made it extraordinary. Its markings made it unforgettable. Running across the surface are rows of carefully carved signs. Some resemble crosses. Others consist of branching lines, angled strokes, enclosed shapes, or repeating geometric forms. Several appear to have been grouped intentionally rather than scattered randomly, giving the impression of an organized system whose purpose remains uncertain. Almost immediately, comparisons emerged. Could these symbols represent one of humanity's earliest attempts at writing? Or were they something entirely different? The questions echo those surrounding the Tărtăria Tablets, yet the Dispilio Tablet introduces an entirely new dimension. Unlike clay, wood is fragile. Under ordinary conditions, it decays rapidly, often disappearing completely within a few centuries. The fact that this tablet survived more than 7,000 years owes everything to the unique conditions beneath the lake. Protected from oxygen and microbial activity, the wood remained preserved long enough for modern archaeologists to recover it. That survival raises an intriguing possibility. If wooden tablets were once commonly used throughout prehistoric Europe, how many others simply disappeared long before they could ever be discovered? Could the archaeological record preserve only a tiny fraction of an extensive tradition now almost entirely erased? It is a humbling thought. Stone survives, clay survives, metal survives. Wood usually does not. Perhaps entire chapters of human communication have vanished simply because they were recorded on materials too fragile to withstand the passage of millennia. Mainstream archaeologists approach the Dispilio tablet with careful caution. Although its authenticity is unquestioned, interpreting its markings remains considerably more difficult. The symbols have never been convincingly deciphered, and no bilingual inscription exists to provide a key comparable to the Rosetta Stone. Without such evidence, certainty remains impossible. Several researchers suggest that the markings may represent ownership symbols, numerical records, ritual notation, or administrative accounting rather than full writing. Early agricultural societies increasingly required methods for organizing stored grain, livestock, seasonal activities, and exchanges between communities. Simple recording systems could have emerged naturally from these practical needs. Others believe the tablet reflects symbolic traditions similar to those observed throughout Neolithic southeastern Europe. Decorated pottery, figurines, and ritual objects frequently display repeated geometric signs. These markings may have carried religious or ceremonial significance understood within their communities, even if they never represented spoken language. Yet another possibility continues attracting attention. Could the Dispilio tablet preserve an intermediate stage between symbolic art and true writing? Human communication almost certainly did not transform overnight from speech into fully developed script. More likely, countless generations experimented with marks, symbols, memory aids, and visual conventions before complete writing systems emerged. The Dispilio tablet may represent one such experiment, not yet writing in the conventional sense, perhaps something moving toward it. One particularly fascinating aspect of the discovery involves its archaeological context. Dispilio itself was far from primitive. Excavations revealed carefully planned dwellings supported on wooden platforms extending into shallow water. Residents practiced farming, fishing, weaving, woodworking, and pottery production. Stone tools, bone implements, ornaments, and evidence of long-distance exchange indicate a society displaying impressive levels of organization. This broader picture matters enormously. Advanced communication systems rarely emerge in isolation. They usually develop within communities whose economic and social complexity creates increasing demands for preserving information beyond individual memory. Seasonal harvests, trade agreements, family relationships, religious ceremonies, resource distribution. As societies expand, memory alone gradually becomes insufficient. Could Dispilio represent one of those pivotal moments when visual symbols began assuming new responsibilities? The tablet itself remains silent. Modern imaging techniques have attempted to reveal additional details hidden within its weathered surface. High-resolution photography, digital enhancement, and microscopic examination continue documenting every surviving incision. Conservators face the delicate challenge of preserving the fragile wood while allowing ongoing study. Unlike stone inscriptions, the tablet cannot simply be exposed indefinitely. Its preservation requires constant care. Even after excavation, ancient wood begins changing once removed from the stable environment that protected it for thousands of years. The artifact therefore reminds us that archaeological discovery is only the beginning. Preservation becomes equally important. Without careful conservation, priceless evidence can disappear even after recovery. The Dispilio tablet has also become part of a larger discussion concerning the origins of European civilization. For much of the 20th century, historians tended to view southeastern Europe primarily as a recipient of innovations originating elsewhere. Recent archaeological discoveries have complicated that picture considerably. Neolithic communities throughout the Balkans demonstrated remarkable achievements in farming, metallurgy, settlement planning, and artistic expression long before many earlier historical models predicted. The Dispilio settlement contributes meaningfully to that evolving understanding. Its inhabitants clearly possessed technical skill, environmental knowledge, and social organization sufficient to support permanent communities over extended periods. Against this background, the appearance of organized symbolic markings becomes far less surprising. Still, caution remains essential. Similarity does not equal identity. Organized symbols do not automatically constitute writing. Several linguists emphasize that writing records language itself rather than simply conveying ideas. A complete script must consistently represent words, sounds, or grammatical structures in ways allowing readers to reconstruct spoken communication. No evidence yet demonstrates that the Dispilio symbols functioned in this manner. Others argue that applying modern definitions too rigidly may obscure the gradual nature of cultural evolution. Perhaps humanity experimented with numerous communication systems before one ultimately developed into recognizable writing. Some may have disappeared without descendants. Others may have influenced later traditions indirectly. Innovation often resembles branching pathways rather than a single straight road. The Dispilio Tablet fits comfortably within that possibility. Its mystery deepens further when considered alongside other prehistoric artifacts bearing enigmatic signs. Across southeastern Europe, archaeologists continue discovering symbols carved onto pottery, figurines, spindle whorls, seals, and ceremonial objects. Individually, each artifact raises intriguing questions. Together, they suggest that symbolic communication occupied an important place within Neolithic societies. Whether these traditions remained entirely symbolic or gradually evolved toward literacy remains uncertain. The archaeological record simply does not preserve enough evidence to answer conclusively. Some speculative theories extend considerably further. A small number of researchers propose that prehistoric Europe once possessed sophisticated communication traditions largely erased by time. According to these ideas, later civilizations may have inherited fragments of much older systems whose original forms have disappeared. Such proposals remain outside mainstream archaeological consensus. No continuous line of evidence currently supports the existence of a forgotten prehistoric script extending across Europe. Nevertheless, the speculation reflects a broader truth. The archaeological record remains incomplete. Every excavation uncovers only a tiny fraction of what once existed. Entire settlements remain buried. Organic materials decay. Floods reshape landscapes. Forests reclaim abandoned villages. Countless artifacts undoubtedly disappeared forever, long before archaeology emerged as a scientific discipline. The Dispilio Tablet stands as a rare survivor from that vanished world. It encourages humility, not because it proves extraordinary claims, but because it reminds us how much evidence time has already removed. Imagine the settlement on an ordinary morning more than 7,000 years ago. Wooden walkways stretching over calm water, smoke rising gently from hearths, children moving between houses, fishing nets drying in the sunlight, farmers preparing nearby fields, craftsmen shaping wood and stone with practiced hands. Somewhere within that community, an individual carefully incises symbols into fresh timber. Every line is deliberate. Every mark carries meaning understood by someone. Perhaps instructions, perhaps ritual, perhaps memory, perhaps something else entirely. The tablet eventually falls from use. It becomes buried beneath mud. Generation after generation passes. Languages disappear. Communities change. Empires rise and fall. The lake remains. When archaeologists finally recover the artifact thousands of years later, the marks remain visible. Their meaning does not. Perhaps that is the greatest mystery surrounding the Dispilio Tablet. Not whether it represents writing, accounting, ritual symbolism, or something entirely different, but how close we may be to understanding a message whose key has simply not yet been found. The people who created those symbols were no less intelligent than ourselves. They observed their world, organized their communities, solved practical problems, and expressed ideas through materials available to them. Somewhere within those carefully carved lines may survive a fragment of their intellectual world, waiting patiently for future discoveries to provide the context needed for interpretation. Until then, the Dispilio Tablet remains suspended between silence and communication, preserving one of prehistory's most intriguing unanswered questions. It does not demand extraordinary conclusions, nor does it surrender easy explanations. Instead, it quietly invites us to consider how many voices from humanity's earliest chapters still rest hidden beneath the earth, their messages intact, their meanings just beyond our reach, awaiting the moment when another forgotten piece of the puzzle finally comes to light. That possibility has encouraged researchers to look beyond the tablet itself and study the entire world in which it was created. Every post recovered from the lakebed, every fragment of pottery, and every preserved seed contributes another clue to the lives of the people who once called Dispilio home. Piece by piece, archaeology has revealed a community that was far more sophisticated than earlier generations might have imagined. The settlement occupied the edge of Lake Orestiada for centuries. Houses stood on timber platforms supported by wooden piles driven into the shallow lake bed, connected by narrow walkways that allowed residents to move between homes while remaining above the water. Such construction demanded planning, cooperation, and an intimate understanding of the surrounding environment. The lake itself shaped nearly every aspect of daily life. It provided fish, fresh water, reeds for weaving, and natural protection from predators. Nearby forests supplied timber, while fertile land supported early farming. Excavations have uncovered grains, animal bones, woven textiles, fishing equipment, and woodworking tools, painting the picture of a thriving Neolithic settlement rather than an isolated village struggling for survival. Within such an organized society, communication would have been essential. Not merely spoken conversation, but systems capable of preserving knowledge beyond a single moment. Agricultural communities depended upon seasonal rhythms. Crops had to be planted and harvested at appropriate times. Fishing grounds required careful management. Resources needed to be shared. Rituals marking important moments of the year likely followed established traditions passed from one generation to the next. Could symbols have played a role in maintaining that continuity? Many archaeologists believe so. Even without constituting full writing, symbolic notation could have served practical purposes. Simple marks might identify ownership, count stored goods, record exchanges, or designate sacred objects. Such systems appear throughout human history in cultures separated by vast distances, often emerging long before fully developed scripts. The Dispilio Tablet may belong within this broader pattern, yet certain details continue to resist straightforward explanation. The symbols do not appear carelessly scratched into the wood. Their spacing suggests deliberate planning. Several signs recur with subtle variations, while others remain unique. This balance between repetition and diversity has intrigued specialists attempting to determine whether the markings reflect a structured system or an individual composition. Unfortunately, only one such tablet has survived. That scarcity presents a significant obstacle. If dozens of similar tablets existed, researchers could compare repeated sequences, identify recurring patterns, and begin constructing possible interpretations. With only a single example, every hypothesis remains difficult to test. It is rather like discovering a single page torn from an unknown book without any indication of the language in which it was written. The challenge is compounded by the passage of time. More than 7,000 years separate the modern world from the people of Dispilio. Languages evolve rapidly over centuries. Over millennia, entire language families disappear without leaving direct descendants. Even if the tablet records spoken words, there may be no surviving linguistic relatives capable of providing meaningful comparisons. This realization has led some researchers to focus less on decipherment and more on cultural context. Instead of asking, "What does this symbol mean?" they ask, "Why was someone motivated to carve symbols at all?" That shift in perspective opens fascinating possibilities. Perhaps the act of carving itself held ceremonial significance. The tablet may have accompanied rituals marking seasonal festivals, family lineages, or community agreements. It could have served as a teaching aid, preserving knowledge transmitted between generations. Or it may have functioned as an object whose meaning depended not on reading in the modern sense, but on shared cultural understanding known only to those within the settlement. The broader archaeological evidence suggests that symbolism occupied an important place in Neolithic life. Decorated pottery appears throughout the region, often bearing recurring motifs whose meanings remain uncertain. Figurines displaying carefully incised patterns have been recovered from nearby sites. Even ordinary household objects sometimes feature geometric designs that seem too consistent to be purely decorative. Taken together, these discoveries hint at societies in which visual symbols formed part of everyday experience. Whether those symbols represented language, belief, identity, or memory remains unresolved. Modern technology continues offering new ways to investigate the tablet without risking damage to the fragile wood. Three-dimensional scanning captures microscopic details of every carved groove. Reflectance imaging reveals subtle surface variations invisible under ordinary lighting. Digital archives allow specialists around the world to study the object collaboratively, comparing it with similar discoveries from other prehistoric sites. Each advancement brings fresh insight. None has unlocked the tablet's meaning. Perhaps that is fitting. The Dispilio Tablet reminds us that archaeology is not simply the recovery of ancient objects. It is an ongoing conversation between the present and the distant past, shaped by incomplete evidence, careful interpretation, and the willingness to accept uncertainty where certainty cannot yet exist. Every civilization leaves behind countless traces of its existence. Most disappear. A fortunate few survive. Among those survivors, an even smaller number continue asking questions that no generation has fully answered. The Dispilio Tablet belongs to that rare group. It is not remarkable because of its size or appearance. It is remarkable because it preserves the possibility that human beings were experimenting with increasingly complex ways of recording thought long before history traditionally begins. Whether those experiments ultimately led nowhere or contributed, however indirectly, to later traditions remains unknown. As the quiet waters of Lake Orestiada continue reflecting the surrounding mountains, the place where the tablet rested for thousands of years remains almost unchanged. Beneath that tranquil surface, countless untold stories may still lie hidden, preserved by mud, water, and time. And perhaps somewhere among them rests another fragment, one capable of transforming a handful of mysterious symbols into a message that humanity has been waiting more than 7 millennia to hear. If the Dispilio Tablet reminds us that even the faintest marks can preserve echoes of forgotten knowledge, the next mystery invites us to look not at carved symbols, but at shimmering sheets of gold shaped into towering cones. Their delicate surfaces are covered with thousands of carefully arranged patterns, each one pressed into the metal with astonishing precision. At first glance, they appear ceremonial, almost theatrical. Yet, the more closely they are examined, the more they suggest that their creators may have been encoding something far more complex than decoration. Across parts of Central Europe, scattered forests, broad river valleys, and gently rolling hills conceal traces of cultures that flourished during the Bronze Age. Long before written chronicles described these lands, skilled metalworkers transformed gold, bronze, and copper into objects whose craftsmanship continues to astonish modern archaeologists. Their creations reveal societies capable of remarkable artistry, extensive trade, and sophisticated symbolic traditions. Among the rarest discoveries from this period are 4 extraordinary objects known collectively as the Golden Hats. One of them is closely associated with the region surrounding Nebra in present-day Germany, where another famous Bronze Age treasure, the Sky Disk of Nebra, reshaped our understanding of prehistoric astronomy. Although the hats were discovered at different locations across Europe, they are often discussed together because of their striking similarities in construction, decoration, and apparent purpose. Each hat rises into a tall, tapering cone, some standing more than 2 feet high. Fashioned from an astonishingly thin sheet of hammered gold, they weigh surprisingly little despite their impressive size. Modern craftsmen, attempting to reproduce them, quickly discover the extraordinary skill required to create such objects without tearing or collapsing the delicate metal. Even more remarkable than their shape is the intricate decoration covering nearly every visible surface. Thousands of tiny circles, rings, discs, ovals, and repeating geometric motifs are arranged in carefully ordered horizontal bands. Some patterns repeat dozens of times before giving way to entirely different sequences. Others appear only once, breaking the visual rhythm with deliberate precision. Nothing about the arrangement feels accidental. Each impression was individually pressed into the gold using specialized tools, requiring immense patience and remarkable consistency. Standing before one of these artifacts in a museum, the first impression is often one of elegance. The second is curiosity. Why would Bronze Age artisans devote such extraordinary effort to producing an object that appears almost impossibly elaborate? The golden hats are generally dated to between approximately 1400 BC and 800 BC, placing them within the late Bronze Age. During this period, Central Europe supported increasingly interconnected societies linked through trade routes stretching from the Atlantic coast to the Danube and beyond. Metals, amber, salt, textiles, and ideas moved across these networks, connecting communities separated by hundreds of miles. Gold occupied a unique place within this world. Unlike bronze, it possessed little practical value for tools or weapons. Instead, its brilliance, resistance to corrosion, and rarity gave it immense symbolic importance. Across many ancient cultures, gold became associated with divine power, authority, immortality, and the heavens. Objects fashioned from gold were rarely ordinary possessions. They often belonged to religious leaders, political elites, or ceremonial traditions whose significance extended far beyond material wealth. From the moment the golden hats were studied in detail, archaeologists recognized that they were unlikely to have served everyday purposes. Their fragile construction makes ordinary use improbable. Thin gold sheets would dent easily and provide no practical protection. Instead, most researchers believe they functioned as ceremonial headdresses worn during important rituals. But by whom? One widely accepted interpretation identifies them as the regalia of Bronze Age priests or religious specialists. The towering shape would have made the wearer immediately recognizable within ceremonial gatherings. Gold, reflecting sunlight with extraordinary brilliance, could reinforce associations with celestial powers, seasonal cycles, or divine authority. Ancient societies frequently distinguished religious leaders through elaborate clothing. The hats may have formed part of a much larger ceremonial costume now lost to time. Yet another layer of mystery emerged during the late 20th century. Researchers began examining the decorative patterns not simply as ornamentation, but as structured numerical sequences. Among the most influential studies was the work of German archaeologist Wilfried Mengen, and later analyses by other scholars who noticed that the repeated bands appeared to follow highly organized mathematical arrangements. Could the decorations encode information? Detailed counting revealed something extraordinary. The numbers of repeated symbols within individual bands seemed capable of representing lunar and solar cycles with remarkable accuracy. By adding or subtracting values associated with particular decorative zones, researchers found that the sequences could correspond closely to the movements of the moon and the sun over extended periods. If this interpretation is correct, the hats may represent one of the oldest known portable cylindrical systems ever discovered. Rather than functioning merely as ceremonial ornaments, they could have served as sophisticated mnemonic devices, allowing knowledgeable individuals to calculate important astronomical cycles. The implications are remarkable. Agricultural societies depended upon accurate knowledge of seasonal change. Predicting planting seasons, harvest periods, and ceremonial festivals required careful observation of celestial events. Reconciling the lunar month with the solar year presents a challenge still encountered in many traditional calendars today. The golden hats may have offered a practical solution. Through memorized numerical patterns embedded within decorative bands, experienced observers could potentially calculate complex astronomical relationships without written tables. This theory remains one of the most fascinating interpretations proposed for any Bronze Age artifact. At the same time, it remains debated. Many archaeologists agree that the numerical regularities are real. Whether those patterns intentionally encode astronomical calculations remains less certain. Human beings naturally create ordered decorative designs. Repetition alone does not necessarily imply mathematical purpose. Still, the apparent correspondence between the ornamentation and known astronomical cycles has proven difficult to dismiss completely. The connection becomes even more intriguing when considered alongside the Sky Disk of Nebra. Although the hats and the disk were not discovered together and differ significantly in form, both appear to emerge from Bronze Age societies demonstrating unusually sophisticated awareness of celestial movements. Could they reflect different expressions of the same intellectual tradition? Might priestly specialists have used multiple ceremonial objects while observing the heavens and organizing ritual calendars? Or do similarities simply reflect the universal importance of the sun and moon within agricultural societies? No definitive answer exists. Another mystery concerns their manufacture. Creating a single golden hat required extraordinary technical expertise. The gold sheet had to be hammered repeatedly until it became astonishingly thin without cracking. Craftsmen then shaped the metal into a seamless cone before pressing thousands of decorative impressions into its surface using specially prepared punches. One mistake could ruin months of painstaking work. Experimental archaeologists attempting modern reconstructions have demonstrated just how demanding this process would have been using Bronze Age technology. The artisans responsible clearly possessed generations of accumulated metallurgical knowledge. Where did that expertise originate? Bronze Age Europe contains abundant evidence of advanced metalworking, yet objects of such complexity remain exceptionally rare. Were these hats produced within specialized workshops serving wide regions? Did only a handful of master craftsmen possess the required skills? Or were they created for individuals whose social or religious roles justified such extraordinary investment? The archaeological record offers only fragments. The 4 surviving hats were discovered under very different circumstances. Some were unearthed accidentally. Others emerged during agricultural activity or construction work. Unlike carefully excavated ceremonial sites, many lacked the detailed contextual information modern archaeology relies upon for interpretation. Had they originally been buried as ritual offerings, hidden during times of conflict, placed deliberately within sacred landscapes? Once again, certainty proves elusive. The hats have also inspired more speculative theories. Some writers argue that their apparent astronomical sophistication reflects knowledge inherited from much older civilizations now forgotten. Others suggest they preserve remnants of advanced priestly traditions stretching across prehistoric Europe, linking distant communities through shared cosmological understanding. A few even speculate that the extraordinary craftsmanship exceeds what Bronze Age societies should have achieved. Mainstream archaeology sees little reason to invoke such explanations. Evidence increasingly demonstrates that prehistoric European communities possessed technical abilities far greater than earlier generations once imagined. Every decade brings new discoveries revealing unexpected engineering, metallurgy, architecture, and long-distance exchange. The golden hats fit comfortably within this expanding picture of prehistoric innovation. They remind us that technological sophistication does not always require written records or monumental stone structures. Knowledge can flourish quietly within skilled communities whose achievements survive only through carefully crafted objects. Another fascinating aspect involves the symbolism of height. The extraordinary vertical form would have transformed the appearance of anyone wearing the hat. Standing before a gathered community, a priest crowned by shimmering gold would appear taller, more imposing, perhaps even otherworldly. Sunlight striking the polished surface could produce dazzling reflections visible from considerable distances. Did such visual effects reinforce religious ceremonies tied to solar events? Ancient rituals frequently employed light, elevation, and symbolism to create memorable experiences. The golden hats may have participated in such performances, blending astronomy, craftsmanship, authority, and spirituality into a single object. Modern conservation has revealed additional details invisible to earlier researchers. Microscopic examination identifies tiny hammer marks left during manufacture. Wear patterns suggest at least some hats were genuinely worn rather than produced solely for burial. Minute repairs indicate that valuable objects continued receiving maintenance throughout their ceremonial lives rather than being discarded after damage. These observations make the hats feel surprisingly human. Someone shaped them. Someone repaired them. Someone carefully placed them upon another person's head before ceremonies now forever beyond reconstruction. Imagine such an occasion. The sky darkens as evening approaches. Communities gather upon a hill overlooking forests and rivers. Seasonal change approaches. The movements of the sun and moon determine the timing of planting, harvest, or sacred festivals. A ceremonial leader steps forward wearing a towering golden headdress that catches the final rays of sunlight. Every engraved circle reflects brilliant light. Every carefully pressed band represents countless hours of skilled labor. Whether the decorative patterns encode astronomical knowledge or simply symbolize cosmic order, those assembled undoubtedly understood meanings now hidden from us. Their traditions continued for generations, then gradually disappeared. The hats remained. The people did not. Today, researchers continue examining every band, every punched symbol, and every manufacturing detail in hopes of uncovering additional clues. Advances in digital imaging, three-dimensional scanning, and materials science have expanded our understanding of how these remarkable objects were created. Yet the deeper questions remain remarkably resilient. Were the golden hats ceremonial crowns, portable calendars, sacred teaching devices, symbols of political authority, or ingenious combinations of all these roles serving purposes that modern categories struggle to separate? Perhaps the greatest lesson offered by these extraordinary artifacts is that ancient knowledge often survives in unexpected forms. Not every scientific tradition was recorded in books. Not every calendar was carved into stone. Sometimes information may have been woven into ritual, preserved through craftsmanship, or encoded within patterns whose significance depended upon oral instruction now long vanished. As the golden hats continue resting beneath carefully controlled museum lighting, their brilliant surfaces still shimmer much as they did more than 3,000 years ago. Every tiny circle and every precisely arranged band remains exactly where its maker intended, preserving a silent pattern whose full meaning may never be completely recovered. Yet that silence is not empty. It is an invitation, one that continues to encourage archaeologists, historians, and curious minds alike to look beyond appearances and ask whether humanity's earliest intellectual achievements may still be waiting to reveal themselves, hidden in plain sight within objects we have only begun to understand. That invitation has led scholars to compare the golden hats with other ceremonial objects discovered throughout Bronze Age Europe, searching for recurring themes that might reveal the traditions from which they emerged. While no identical artifacts have been found beyond the 4 surviving examples, echoes of similar symbolism appear in decorated weapons, ritual vessels, and ornaments whose designs repeatedly emphasize the heavens, the changing seasons, and the cyclical nature of time. This broader context is significant. The Bronze Age was an era in which careful observation of the sky shaped nearly every aspect of life. Before mechanical clocks or written calendars, the movement of the sun, moon, and stars offered the most reliable measure of passing time. Communities depended upon these celestial rhythms to organize agriculture, trade, travel, and religious ceremonies. A mistake of only a few weeks could have serious consequences. Plant crops too early, and late frosts might destroy them. Plant too late, and harvests could fail before winter arrived. Accurate seasonal knowledge was not merely convenient, it was essential for survival. This reality gives additional weight to the theory that certain members of society may have specialized in observing the heavens. Rather than viewing astronomy as an isolated scientific pursuit, ancient communities likely regarded it as a sacred responsibility, blending practical knowledge with religious tradition. Those capable of predicting seasonal change would naturally command considerable respect. Could the Golden Hats have identified such individuals? Many researchers believe this possibility deserves careful consideration. The hats are too delicate for warfare, too elaborate for ordinary clothing, and too valuable to have belonged to the average member of society. Their rarity alone suggests that only a select few could have possessed them. Whether those individuals served as priests, astronomical observers, political leaders, or fulfilled several of these roles simultaneously remains uncertain. The extraordinary decoration reinforces this impression. More than simply covering the surface with attractive patterns, the craftsmen organized the symbols into carefully separated horizontal zones. Each band maintains remarkable consistency, even though every tiny impression was created by hand. Such precision required patience, planning, and exceptional technical ability. It also required intention. Random decoration rarely produces such disciplined repetition. Experimental archaeology has offered additional insight into the manufacturing process. Modern artisans using reconstructed Bronze Age tools have attempted to recreate portions of the hats, discovering that the work demands extraordinary concentration. Thin gold behaves unpredictably under repeated hammering. Too much force can split the metal. Too little fails to achieve the desired shape. Every stage requires careful control. The decorative punches present another challenge. Researchers have identified numerous individual stamps used to create circles, crescents, ribs, and other geometric motifs. These tools themselves had to be crafted with remarkable precision before they could produce the repeating designs seen on the finished objects. This level of specialization points toward workshops supported by organized societies capable of sustaining skilled craftsmen over many years. Another intriguing question concerns visibility. The hats would have been impossible to ignore. Their towering form transformed the silhouette of the wearer, while polished gold reflected sunlight with extraordinary intensity. During ceremonies held outdoors, the visual effect must have been striking. Even from a considerable distance, a figure crowned by one of these gleaming cones would stand apart from everyone else present. Light has always played an important role in ritual. Across many ancient cultures, reflective materials symbolized the heavens, divine authority, or the life-giving power of the sun. Gold, unlike most metals, resists tarnish and retains its brilliance over centuries. To Bronze Age communities, that enduring radiance may have carried profound symbolic meaning. Some archaeologists have suggested that the hats functioned almost as visual representations of the cosmos itself. The upward taper could symbolize the connection between earth and sky, while the carefully ordered decorative bands reflected the regular movements of celestial bodies. Whether intended literally or symbolically, such interpretations fit comfortably within broader patterns of prehistoric religious expression. Of course, certainty remains beyond reach. No written explanation survives. No accompanying inscription identifies the purpose of the hats. No ancient illustration depicts them being worn. Everything we infer comes from the objects themselves and the archaeological world surrounding them. Yet perhaps that uncertainty is precisely what gives these artifacts their enduring power. Unlike mysteries built upon rumor or undocumented claims, the golden hats ask their questions through tangible evidence. They are authentic creations, crafted by real people whose technical achievements continue to impress even after more than 3,000 years. Every microscopic hammer mark confirms the skill of their makers. Every decorative band reflects deliberate human choices. What those choices ultimately meant is another matter entirely. Perhaps future discoveries will uncover another ceremonial site, a buried workshop, or additional examples preserving clues that the surviving hats alone cannot provide. Archaeology has repeatedly shown that a single excavation can transform decades of speculation into clearer understanding. Until then, the Nebra cylindrical gold hats continue to occupy a remarkable place among the world's great archaeological enigmas. They stand not as proof of forgotten super-civilizations or impossible technology, but as compelling reminders that the intellectual and artistic achievements of ancient societies often exceeded the expectations of later generations. Their gleaming surfaces preserve more than gold. They preserve the quiet possibility that some of humanity's earliest insights into the rhythms of the universe are still waiting to be fully recognized, hidden within patterns that have endured while the knowledge needed to interpret them has slowly slipped into history. If the Nebra cylindrical gold hats remind us that ancient knowledge was sometimes preserved in symbols rather than words, the next mystery leads us toward something carved not into precious metal, but into solid stone. Hidden for thousands of years inside a silent chamber, these markings remained unseen until modern archaeologists illuminated them once again. Unlike portable artifacts carried from place to place, this mystery has never moved. It has waited patiently beneath an enormous capstone, protected by its own weight, preserving questions that have echoed across nearly 4,000 years. On the volcanic plateau known as the Golan Heights, rugged hills stretch toward the horizon beneath wide, open skies. The landscape is scattered with ancient stone structures, circles, walls, burial monuments, and megalithic tombs built by communities whose names have long since disappeared from history. Winds sweep across fields of dark basalt, carrying little indication that beneath these stones lie some of the region's oldest ceremonial spaces. Among these monuments stands an especially remarkable structure. Known today as the Shamir Dolmen, it appears at first to be little more than a massive pile of weathered basalt blocks. From the outside, there is little to distinguish it from the hundreds of other dolmens spread across the surrounding hills. Yet appearances can be deceptive. Within its burial chamber lies one of the most unusual examples of prehistoric rock art ever discovered in the region. A dolmen is, in its simplest form, a stone-built burial monument. Massive upright slabs support an enormous horizontal capstone, creating an enclosed chamber where the dead were placed thousands of years ago. Such monuments appear across Europe, Asia, and parts of the Middle East, reflecting architectural traditions that emerged independently or spread gradually through cultural exchange. The Shamir dolmen is exceptional not simply because of its size, but because of its construction. Its capstone weighs an estimated 50 tons. Transporting and positioning a stone of such immense weight without modern machinery required remarkable planning, coordination, and engineering skill. Even today, standing beneath that enormous slab inspires a sense of quiet awe. Every visitor inevitably wonders how Bronze Age builders achieved such precision, using only the tools and resources available to them. The chamber itself remained sealed and undisturbed for thousands of years. When archaeologists carefully entered and documented the interior, they found evidence that the monument had served as a burial place during the Intermediate Bronze Age, roughly between 2500 BC and 2000 BC. Human remains and grave goods confirmed its funerary purpose, placing it within a broader tradition of monumental burial architecture found throughout the region. Then, researchers looked upward. Etched into the underside of the capstone were a series of carefully carved motifs unlike anything previously documented inside local dolmens. At first glance, the carvings appear deceptively simple. Each consists of a straight vertical line topped by a gently curving arc, producing a shape sometimes compared to an anchor, a stylized human figure, or an abstract branch. Dozens of these motifs cover portions of the chamber ceiling, arranged with deliberate spacing rather than random placement. Nothing about their distribution suggests accident. Every symbol was intentionally carved. Every position appears carefully chosen. The discovery immediately attracted attention because decorated dolmens are extraordinarily rare in this part of the world. Most regional burial chambers are architecturally impressive but visually plain. Their builders invested enormous effort in transporting and arranging massive stones, yet left few decorative elements behind. The Shamir dolmen therefore stands apart, offering a rare glimpse into symbolic traditions usually hidden from view. What do the carvings represent? That question has remained at the heart of ongoing research. Mainstream archaeologists approach the motifs cautiously. Some interpret them as abstract symbolic designs connected with funerary beliefs. Others suggest they may represent trees, human forms, or ceremonial emblems understood by the communities responsible for constructing the monument. Because no accompanying inscriptions survive, assigning precise meanings remains impossible. The carvings belong to a prehistoric culture that left almost no written record. Their symbols speak without translation. One possibility links the repeated forms to concepts of ancestry. Many ancient societies viewed burial monuments not simply as places of interment, but as sacred spaces where relationships between the living and the dead continued. Symbols carved within such chambers may have represented lineage, protection, spiritual transformation, or journeys beyond earthly life. Another interpretation considers their possible relationship to the surrounding landscape. The curved forms could symbolize vegetation, celestial events, or natural forces central to Bronze Age belief systems. Throughout human history, simple geometric shapes have often carried meanings far richer than their appearance suggests. Yet another question emerges almost immediately. Why carve symbols onto the ceiling? Unlike exterior monuments intended for public display, these carvings remained hidden within the enclosed chamber. Only individuals entering the burial space could have seen them. Once the monument was sealed, darkness would have concealed the images entirely. Who, then, were they created for? The living? The deceased? Or perhaps something neither modern archaeology nor anthropology can easily define? This hidden placement distinguishes the Shamir carvings from many other examples of prehistoric rock art. Rather than communicating openly, they seem almost private. Their intended audience may have been limited to a small group participating in burial ceremonies before the chamber was permanently closed. If so, the symbols may have functioned within rituals whose details disappeared thousands of years ago. The engineering achievement represented by the monument introduces another layer of mystery. Constructing a chamber beneath a 50-ton basalt slab demanded careful planning. Builders first identified suitable stone. They then quarried, transported, and positioned it using methods still debated today. Experimental archaeology suggests that large teams employing wooden rollers, earthen ramps, ropes, and carefully coordinated labor could accomplish such feats. Even so, the logistical challenge remains impressive. Communities capable of organizing projects on this scale possessed social structures more sophisticated than once assumed. For many years, historians viewed the Intermediate Bronze Age in this region as a period marked by relatively small communities lacking centralized political organization. The Shamir Dolmen has encouraged reconsideration of that perspective. Monuments requiring enormous collective effort imply leadership, planning, specialized knowledge, and shared belief systems capable of motivating large groups toward common goals. The carvings therefore become more than artistic decoration. They represent evidence of symbolic thought embedded within a society already demonstrating remarkable engineering ability. Modern technology has greatly expanded our ability to study the chamber. Three-dimensional laser scanning allows researchers to document every carved groove with microscopic accuracy. Digital models preserve the monument in remarkable detail, enabling specialists to examine subtle relationships between the carvings, the chamber architecture, and natural lighting conditions. These investigations have confirmed that the motifs were intentionally produced rather than resulting from natural weathering or accidental tool marks. Microscopic analysis also indicates that they were carved before the monument was sealed. Every new observation strengthens confidence in their authenticity. At the same time, each confirmed detail raises new questions. Some researchers have explored possible astronomical interpretations. Across many prehistoric cultures, monumental architecture often displays alignments with the sun, moon, or prominent stars. Could the Shamir Dolmen participate in similar traditions? At present, no widely accepted evidence demonstrates that the carvings themselves encode astronomical information. Nevertheless, the possibility continues attracting careful investigation. Others have searched for parallels elsewhere. Rock art displaying repeated abstract motifs appears in many parts of the ancient world, yet direct comparisons remain difficult. Similar shapes often emerge independently in different cultures because simple geometric forms naturally lend themselves to symbolic expression. Resemblance alone cannot establish cultural connection. This caution is particularly important when discussing prehistoric art. Human beings possess an extraordinary ability to recognize patterns. Sometimes those patterns reveal genuine historical relationships. Sometimes they reflect little more than coincidence. Distinguishing between the two requires evidence rather than intuition. Still, the mystery persists. The Shamir carvings refuse easy categorization. They are too deliberate to dismiss as random decoration, too abstract to interpret confidently, too isolated to compare comfortably with established traditions. Speculative interpretations inevitably follow. Some writers have suggested the symbols preserve knowledge inherited from forgotten ceremonial systems extending across ancient Eurasia. Others imagine they represent maps, astronomical diagrams, or coded religious teachings known only to select individuals. A few propose that the monument formed part of a much broader ritual landscape, whose full extent remains undiscovered. Mainstream archaeology neither confirms nor completely excludes many of these possibilities. Instead, researchers emphasize the need for continued excavation and careful analysis. Archaeology progresses through evidence accumulated gradually over decades, not dramatic conclusions drawn from isolated discoveries. The Shamir dolmen illustrates this principle beautifully. Every confirmed fact enhances the monument's significance. No extraordinary assumptions are necessary to appreciate its importance. Imagine the chamber shortly after its completion. Freshly cut basalt still bears the marks of stone tools. Torchlight flickers against the newly carved ceiling, causing shadows to dance across the repeating motifs overhead. Voices echo softly within the enclosed space as participants prepare for a burial ceremony. The symbols above are already complete. Those present understand their meaning. No explanation is needed. The chamber is eventually sealed. Centuries become millennia. Empires rise and disappear. Languages evolve beyond recognition. The basalt remains. When archaeologists reopen the chamber thousands of years later, the carvings emerge unchanged. Their creators anticipated neither excavation nor scientific study. They carved for purposes rooted entirely within their own world. That world has vanished. Its symbols endure. Perhaps this is what makes the Shamir dolmen chamber carvings so captivating. Unlike monuments covered with lengthy inscriptions awaiting translation, these simple motifs offer almost no direct guidance. They resist certainty while inviting observation. They encourage careful thought rather than immediate answers. As researchers continue surveying the surrounding landscape, additional dolmens occasionally emerge from beneath vegetation and accumulated soil. Each new discovery raises the possibility that similar carvings may still await recognition inside sealed chambers never before examined. If that happens, patterns may begin to emerge. Connections now invisible may gradually become clearer. Until then, the Shamir dolmen remains one of archaeology's quietest mysteries, a place where engineering, ritual, symbolism, and silence meet beneath 50 tons of ancient stone. Looking upward inside that dark chamber, it becomes impossible not to wonder whether those repeated carvings preserve a forgotten language of belief, a sacred tradition known only to Bronze Age builders, or simply a message whose meaning has patiently waited thousands of years for the right moment to be understood. That possibility has inspired archaeologists to examine not only the carvings themselves, but also the broader landscape surrounding the Shamir dolmen. Increasingly, researchers have come to view the monument as part of a much larger ceremonial environment, rather than an isolated tomb. Hundreds of dolmens are scattered across the volcanic plateau, forming one of the largest concentrations of megalithic burial structures in the Middle East. Some stand alone on quiet hillsides, while others appear in loose clusters overlooking valleys and ancient travel routes. Together, they suggest a society that invested enormous effort in honoring its dead. For many years, these monuments received relatively little attention. Their rough appearance led some early observers to assume they were simple stone piles constructed by small pastoral communities. Modern archaeological surveys, however, have painted a far more complex picture. Beneath the weathered basalt lies evidence of careful engineering, deliberate planning, and shared architectural traditions maintained over generations. The Shamir dolmen became especially important because it challenged long-held assumptions. Its massive capstone demonstrated that the builders possessed the ability to organize large workforces capable of transporting and positioning stones weighing many dozens of tons. Such projects required leadership, coordination, and an understanding of mechanics that developed through experience rather than written instruction. Equally remarkable is the precision of the chamber itself. The supporting stones bear the tremendous weight above them with surprising stability. Despite thousands of years of earthquakes, seasonal weather, and gradual erosion, the monument has remained largely intact. Its survival speaks not only to the durability of basalt, but also to the skill of those who selected, shaped, and assembled each massive block. The carvings add an entirely different dimension. Unlike structural elements, they served no engineering purpose. Every engraved symbol required additional labor after construction had already been completed. Someone intentionally entered the finished chamber with stone tools and patiently carved each motif into the underside of the enormous capstone. That decision alone suggests significance. No one would undertake such work without reason. Researchers have also considered whether the repeated symbols may have guided ceremonial movement within the chamber. Could the placement of the carvings correspond to where individuals stood during burial rituals? Were certain sections of the ceiling more important than others? Did torchlight illuminate particular groups of symbols while leaving others hidden in shadow? Although definitive answers remain unavailable, digital reconstructions have shown that lighting conditions inside the enclosed space would have changed dramatically depending upon the position of the flame. In flickering light, carved grooves cast shifting shadows that enhance their visibility. A simple engraved line can appear surprisingly vivid when illuminated from the proper angle. This observation has encouraged some scholars to imagine ceremonies conducted within the chamber before its final sealing, where light, darkness, and stone combine to create an atmosphere of profound symbolism. Another fascinating aspect involves memory. Many prehistoric societies relied entirely upon oral tradition to preserve history, beliefs, and cultural identity. In such communities, physical symbols often served as reminders rather than complete records. A single carved motif might evoke an entire story known to every member of the community. If that was the case at Shamir, the carvings were never intended to be understood in isolation. Their meaning existed within living tradition. Once that tradition disappeared, the symbols remained, but the knowledge that gave them life faded away. This is one of archaeology's greatest challenges. Artifacts survive. Contexts rarely do. The physical object reaches the present, while the songs, ceremonies, languages, and beliefs surrounding it vanish almost completely. The Shamir Dolmen chamber. Carvings illustrate this separation with unusual clarity. The marks themselves are perfectly real. Their significance remains just beyond reach. As additional technologies continue improving archaeological research, scientists hope that microscopic analysis of tool marks, high-resolution mapping of nearby monuments, and future excavations may reveal patterns currently invisible. Perhaps another decorated chamber lies undiscovered beneath the volcanic landscape. Perhaps similar motifs will emerge elsewhere, providing the comparisons needed to place Shamir within a broader symbolic tradition. Or perhaps the monument will remain unique. If so, its mystery may become even more profound. For now, the chamber rests much as it has for nearly 4,000 years. The immense basalt roof still shelters the silent carvings beneath it, while the surrounding hills continue guarding countless monuments that have yet to surrender all of their secrets. Standing within that ancient space, beneath symbols patiently preserved by stone and time, one cannot escape the feeling that the greatest discoveries are not always those that provide answers. Sometimes they are the ones that remind us how much of humanity's earliest spiritual world still waits quietly beyond the limits of our understanding.